G'day guys, Gordon here with Guardians of Freedom. I'm going to jump into this topic that everyone's been arguing about online. I've stayed out of it by purpose. I have not discussed the 31st of August 2025 planned march. What I've done instead is I've just put up posts to try and get people thinking, and I've left it at that. We're 2 days out, 29th of the 8th, and I thought, all right, it's about time I saved the best for last. Just kidding. What I feel I'm going to do is bring a different perspective to this conversation. What I want to do is try and have a respectful, rational conversation, take the emotion out, and I'm bringing my perspective, which is 25 years of studying this New World Order in depth and analyzing how they operate. So that's what I'm bringing to this conversation. Now, when I say New World Order, that's what this is really about. So some people are sort of new to the movement or the agenda, and they may not really understand that yet. So I recommend you go and do your studies, educate about what the New World Order is. Our website, guardians-of-freedom.com, has got plenty of resources. Now, I've got a cold, so I'm going to be sneezing a little bit in between, so my apologies. But I felt I can't wait for this video any longer. We're 2 days out, so I thought we'll go ahead and do it with the cold anyway. Now, let's start with a couple of questions. Do I believe we should be pausing or slowing down migration numbers? Because this has been a key question or issue that's been raised. And for me, this question alone doesn't mean anybody's racist if they are discussing this. I think everybody has a right in their country to ask these questions and even request this, particularly when you look around and you see in Australia people are living in their cars, people are homeless, there's tent cities, people are struggling to pay their rent, to buy enough food, and they're struggling in so many ways. I think people it's within their right to ask these questions. And perhaps we should be pausing migration a little bit until we can get things under control. I'm going to get into more detail on that later on. Okay, now, do I believe that people within a nation have the right to want to maintain their culture? I have no problem with that. I don't see that as racist at all. In other countries, like in Asia, they're quite open about it, that they want to maintain their culture. In the Middle East, likewise, in Africa, it's quite an open thing. There's no debate about it. Now, do I believe a race has the right to remain pure? That's probably at a higher level. Look, I personally, I don't care about these things. I don't view people in race. But if somebody has that perspective, I don't have an issue with it, which is probably maybe surprising to some people. When you look at other races and cultures, Indians, for example, Asians, probably, I think I could definitely say Middle Easterners. A lot of these people quite openly will say, I want my children to marry our own kind so we can maintain our race and culture. And nobody really bats an eyelid. So I don't have a problem with that even. I do think that when you start sort of enforcing that on others and saying everybody should do this, that becomes a bit of an issue. It moves into more of a fascist realm to say, this is my ideology, everybody should do this. I'm going to discuss later on this New World Order agenda in terms of their plans for race and religion, because there definitely is an agenda. And I will talk about that a bit more later on. What I will mention, so the people out there that are noticing these things, I've noticed this well before the COVID stuff started happening. You see this woke culture stuff being pushed into movies. The other day I just watched on Netflix William Tell, right, which is set in, I think, 1300s in Switzerland. And I was quite surprised when his wife was Arab, and there's heaps of Arabs and brown people everywhere in the movie. Now, that's just not how things were in the 1300s in Switzerland. So there's definitely something going on with that. And it's not just, obviously, this woke culture injection isn't just race. There's some gender politics that you can see being pushed into movies and things like that as well. So, for you guys that are sitting there going, hey, something's going on, something is. And I'm going to get into it a bit further down in this video. But like I said, I do want to try and take a balanced point of view here. Excuse me, guys. So the next question I guess people are asking, is immigration being used as a tool? 100%. It is being used as a tool. It's being used to divide and pit us at each other's throats, to make us go at each other. There's definitely an agenda there. Now, there's no, it can't be a coincidence that we see the same immigration issues in every single country, in Europe, in America, in England, everywhere, right? So there is something there, okay, and I'm going to get into that a bit further down as well. Okay, so the next question, okay, now this March on August 31st, the poster slogan is protest against mass immigration. So the question is immigration the number one issue? So to answer that, I'm going to have a bit of a review on the things that are going on right now in the world and in Australia as well. So we've got a number of issues. So the first one I'll talk about is a digital ID system that's being rolled out. Okay, it's already happening in Australia. Anybody that applies for a new MyGov account is required to provide facial recognition. That's part of a digital ID. So it's a biometric digital ID. And in Mexico, they've already announced a mandatory biometric digital ID, which would be thumbprint and retina scan. Okay, the US is doing it. Every country is doing it. Okay, so this is a major issue, and when we think about what it could be tied to with the central bank digital currency, CBDCs, that's another major issue. They're programmable, they can expire. There's open discussion now through the World Economic Forum and other organizations such as the European Commission about transhumanism and plugging people into the Internet of all things. You can just go out there and you can find a video of the Oracle CEO. Oracle's a company that's been awarded the contract in the US to roll out the AI, $500 billion AI infrastructure program. Now, he's openly said he would like the citizens to consider their privacy of their mind versus the safety of their community. Okay, and more or less has said that we have the tech now where we can read people's minds and stop criminals before they act. Okay, and he wants people to consider plugging in, basically. Okay, there's so much evidence around that. I can just keep going, but I won't. There's the destruction of the economy. Okay, that's happening in every country as well. Definitely in Australia, we can see our economy is being systematically destroyed. Okay, we've got the World Health Organization treaty, okay, which will effectively allow the UN to come in, and our government has sold us out, and they've basically given up our sovereignty to manage our own health, and the UN can come in and do whatever they want. They can lock down, they can force vaccinate, they can do anything they want, okay? Food supplies are being smashed, being destroyed, and this is also happening worldwide. We're talking agriculture, we're talking fisheries, we're talking all the meat industries. Okay, I'm not going to get into details about that, but there's so much evidence around that. We can see socialism being slowly implemented. Okay, talk about universal basic income, universal childcare. We can see the middle class is being slowly reduced until we have one flat lower class, and then we have the elite. Okay, we've got talk about you will own nothing and you'll be happy. That's on the World Economic Forum, guys. So these are massive issues to consider. We've got the indoctrination of our children. Okay, we've got sexualizing programs in schools. They used to go under the banner Safe Schools programs. I'm not sure if they still are, but effectively these programs are teaching very young children, as like 8 or 9, about how to use sex toys so they can, be transgender and whatever else. They're teaching them how to wrap their genitals. They're teaching them about transitioning their genders at a very young age, so they're indoctrinating them. This is ages that children haven't even begun to think about sexuality, so they're getting to them before they get to sexual maturity, so that they can actually believe these things. They're indoctrinating them. Now, this to me is a very important issue. And then we've got, to me, which nobody really seems to want to talk about yet, is the build up to a massive world war. Okay, now we should be actually proactively discussing this now, because once it starts, you won't be able to go out and protest. There's a thing called the National Security Act that'll be invoked, and it will be illegal to talk against the war. So there's so many issues, right, that when I look at these things, I go, well, no, immigration to me does not appear to be the number one issue. And I'll explain a bit more in detail here. So a lot of people will think that the housing crisis or the cost of living crisis is from immigration. Now, I will tell you a couple of things on that. Okay, so early in 2020, I started watching the policies of our governments, and effectively they were making it very difficult for investors to continue operating as property owners. So when we talk investors, most investors are actually just mum and dads who have decided for their retirement's sake to go out and create a nest egg by purchasing an extra property or maybe two extra properties and living off that rental income. I've checked the stats. That is majority of the property investment, property ownership in Australia. And in 2020, 21, 22, regulations started changing, policy started changing, making it very challenging for people to stay in. Okay, now when this ties in with the cost of living crisis, the cost of living, okay, firstly that's a psychological tool, using those words, cost of living. Okay, then they're trying to get people to feel guilty for living. Okay, there's a cost to you to be alive, and you need to feel bad for that. Okay, that all that cost of living means, it's inflation. So that's the word they should be using, and there's a reason that they don't use that word. Now, the Reserve Bank of Australia, the governor, the outgoing governor, he actually, I've seen an interview, I think it was at the press club, where he's basically said that the cause of the cost of living crisis stems from COVID restrictions, from lockdowns that basically affected our supply chains. So it's supply-based inflation. So if, just to explain, guys, for anyone that doesn't understand, when supply goes down, okay, price goes up. That's basic economics. Okay, and you have two types of inflation. You have supply caused inflation, or you have demand caused inflation. That means people are actually going out. Demand causes, they're going out and they're spending too much money. Okay, now anybody who's studied year 10 economics, year 10, year 11, they teach this stuff. You cannot treat supply caused inflation with interest rates. So the RBA governor has said it clearly, that the cost of living crisis, and this is worldwide, stemmed from the COVID lockdowns and restrictions on supplies. Okay, so that's where we got to be looking at, guys, and that's a worldwide phenomenon, right? All of these things, by the way, I mentioned, they all coincidentally or not be happening worldwide. Now, to add insult to injury, economics student at year 10 knows you can't treat the supply caused inflation with interest rates. So what happens when you do that? Okay, so the response from the RBA, okay, was to basically, allow the interest rates to be increased, or not allow, they brought the interest rates up, which effectively smashed property investors again. So you had more investors pulling out of the market, and that's what resulted in the dropping of housing availability, together with the COVID restrictions that affected the building industry. So the building industry was smashed during COVID, okay, absolutely smashed. And all of these restrictions saw the inputs into the building industry, so all the materials used went up in price. So building costs went up, so less building occurred, okay? So these are the drivers or the causes of the housing crisis. Manufactured, okay? It's manufactured all off the bat of COVID. Now, one thing I am going to mention when it comes to immigration, Uh, Again, people are going to probably relate to this. So a lot of people are really angry right now about dangerous migrants being in our community, and there's two sides to that. So obviously, now the way the new world order works, right? It's and you've got to really spend the time to understand that they control all of these different organizations and institutions, including the RBA, especially the RBA, especially all of the reserve banks. That is their foothold. They run all these central banks. They're not private. They're not publicly owned like people are made to believe. Okay, and that's a whole other video to explain that. But you can go online, check out a video called Money Masters. It explains all of this stuff, the history of it all. But when it comes to migrants, okay, the federal court in Australia ruled against or ruled that the Australian government had to release certain migrants, and they were being held in detention because their visas, they couldn't work out whether they wanted to let them in or not, and they couldn't send them back. Apparently they couldn't send them back. Now, these lot of migrants that they released, they should not have been even touching foot on our, having their feet touch our soil. Okay, these ones that they released, they were serious criminal backgrounds. You know, we're talking people that had rape convictions, pedophiles, murderers. Okay, and Albanese is responsible. They've released these people into our community. Okay, Albanese, the dog, is responsible for this. Okay, and there hasn't been any pushback against the federal ruling or anything. It's just, yeah, we're going to release them. Okay, good on you. Here you go, guys. You are a sick dog, my friend, if you think that this is just okay. Albanese, not okay. Okay, now obviously when I look at things like that, yeah, that's a problem. Okay, but why is every country doing the same? All of them. England. So it's all part of a strategy. England, Europe, America, they're all getting these people and they're releasing it. Now, on that note, that doesn't represent all migrants. Okay? Taking a balanced point of view doesn't represent all migrants. That's a very small percentage that they've released in. Okay, and that's some sick stuff that's going on there. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about the actual stats on immigration. I got sent some stats from a friend of mine in the movement, Susan. So thanks, Susan. If you do see this video, that was a great post with some great stats. And effectively, the stats that she provided, and these are government stats, and I know people are going to go, I don't believe this, but they show no change in the volume of migrants. So the people that are going out there and saying there is a massive change in volume are lying. It's as simple as that. There's no change in the volume. And as I mentioned, you know, you do have that segment of dangerous migrants. Now, I also feel like when it comes to, you know, sort of this migrant crime, like there's a crime wave, you know, and there's certain ethnicities that are involved in this. I don't think it's a, you know, a very cut and dry issue. It's quite complex. And when it comes to these kind of things, yeah, we should take a stand. Okay, and you know, don't mistake kindness for weakness. Okay, I will do what needs to get done when it needs to get done. There's no doubt for me that I will do things to keep my community safe and my family and everything else. And these guys are definitely out of control. Some of the stuff that's going on, especially in the capital cities. But I'm going to say this, all right? We've got people that are going to these protests, and they're so full of nonsense. I had other words because they're saying, oh, but we actually love all the migrants. Like we love the Greeks that came, we love the Italians so much together with us. We love our Asian brothers and blah 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 blah. Right? But let's be real about it. Okay, every one of these groups I just mentioned, they had their wave of migration, and they copped it. They copped it. Racism. When the Greeks came, mate, they copped it. And what did they do? They turned to fighting. Okay, now if you take a group of men, young men particularly, which are high testosterone guys, and you put them in a country, and then you face them, welcome them with hate or fight, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to form gangs and they're going to fight. They're going to be full of hate. They're going to be full of anger, and they're going to go at it. Okay, it's a complex topic, and now these happened to the Italians. Okay, when they came, same thing, and they went into crime. Okay, and then the Vietnamese migration wave, same thing happened. Okay, and they went into crime. The Lebanese migration wave, same thing happened, and that we saw gangs coming up and went into crime. Now, most of these ones have sort of second generation now, third generation now, so they've all changed into what they're doing, and they've moved into professional jobs and become productive citizens. But you know, when you approach things like that, and I'll give you a bit of my experience. Like growing up in Melbourne, it was pretty full on. Like you had little groups, and essentially everybody in school. It was like a jail almost, where people all congregated in their race, and there were punch-ons based on race. And you know, you would go sit at your desk, and you would see stuff like you black. You know, I'm not even going to say the words that were. You know, so for me, then as a young man, I see that and I go, all right, I get angry, okay, and then you retaliate, and it never stops. And then one day, obviously, as a mature adult, I look back at that and I go, nah, I'm not going to continue with this kind of cycle of hate. So there are ways that we can deal with this issues, and it's not. I can guarantee you, it's not going at them with hate. We need to have conversations with people. We need to be looking at how we can integrate them in. Okay, that's my take on it, and it's based on a rational basis. So then my question, I'm going to just quickly go back to this issue. So is immigration the number one issue? You know, when I looked at all of those issues there that I just ran through, my personal conclusion, when you got digital ID, let me talk about a few more. You got 15-minute cities, you got climate change restrictions. Okay, you've got definitely some strange clouds up in the sky. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. Farmers are being completely attacked. You've got this inheritance tax in the UK, where effectively, if a farm moves from a parent to a child, they have to pay a tax on it. Now, a lot of the farmers have come out and said we can't operate. We're gonna lose our farms. And farms are being lost already. Fisheries are being killed. It's pretty full on. So what's going on? This 15-minute city issue is big. Okay, so for me, again, I'm looking at this: is immigration the number one issue? I don't believe it is. It's not the number one. It's an issue, but I think people have construed that a little bit or taken it out of context and gone, all right, this is the number one issue. Now, I'm going to actually pull up some stats that I picked up. I mentioned the stats that were sent to me that showed the volume hadn't changed a whole lot. Now, I've got some stats here on, so let me just read through this here. So this is here for 2024, and I got this from ChatGPT, and ChatGPT picked it up off the ABS data. Okay, so top source countries of migrants to Australia. Okay, this is countries by birthplace composition as of June 30th, 2024. Okay, we've got England at the top. All right, England's at the top, 964,000. Okay, we've got India, 916,000, China, 700,000, New Zealand, 618,000, Philippines, 394,000. Okay, the next data that was provided was countries by new permanent migrants. So this reflects the flow of permanent settler arrivals, and this is for the year 23 to 24, which is the latest data we can get a hold of. So number one is India, okay, number two is China, number three is Philippines, number four is Nepal, number five is the UK, number six is Pakistan, number seven is Vietnam, number eight Sri Lanka, number nine is South Africa, number 10 is Iran. So when we talk about, Iran's number 10. So when we talk about, actually I'll pick up another lot of stats I've picked up as well here. So I asked a question, provide me the stats on the permanent immigrants to Australia over the past 5 years based on place of origin, showing the top 10. Okay, so this is for 23 to 24. All right, so India, 49,000. Okay, China, 21,000. Philippines, 11,000. Nepal, 11,000. excuse me guys, UK 9,900, Pakistan 6,800, I'm just rounding it off, Vietnam 6,600, Sri Lanka 5,600, Afghanistan 5,500, South Africa 4,620. Okay, now I looked at the last 5 years and it was more or less pretty much the same. Most of those countries were in the top. Okay, now if you don't believe me, go out there, go to ChatGPT or just search for it yourself and find the stats for yourself. Okay, so there's a lot of, I'm not going to use the word misinformation, a lot of bullshit being put around, okay, and a lot of fear being created, okay, and it's by design. Now, if you can look back at, the era of 9/11, it was very similar. We had all these similar stuff being thrown around, and that was to allow us to do certain things. I'm going to get into that in a bit more detail later on, but for me, when I look at those stats, it's not immigration as the main problem. And I've given you the other evidence, which is the real causes of the so-called cost of living crisis and the housing crisis, which have nothing to do with immigration. Okay, nothing. Okay, it has to do with either poor policies or sabotaging the economy. Okay, and that sits on the head of our scumbag government, right? Which is going from Morrison to that Albanese dog and whoever else comes in after that, because they'll carry on. So then my my next question is, well, why was immigration chosen as the poster slogan? Okay, because that is what the topic's about. It says protest against mass immigration, which to me is an issue somewhere towards the bottom. Definitely under digital ID, definitely under central bank digital currencies, definitely under transhumanism, definitely under plugging people in, definitely under the planned and obvious sabotage of our economy, definitely under the World Health Organization treaty, definitely under our food supplies being smashed, definitely under the laboratory grown foods, definitely under socialism, definitely under a one world government. And this is a topic that doesn't get talked about, which is a clear move towards a world war, okay, World War III. That is something that isn't being discussed at all, should be discussed. We got to be proactive on that one, okay, not reactive like we always are in this movement, okay, because let me tell you guys something. There's an act called the National Security Act, and when the country goes to war, they invoke that act, and it becomes illegal to talk against the war at that time, okay, and we can see it's being formed. Now, geopolitics is fake now, okay, and I'm going to explain that in another video. It is no longer what people used to think it is. You've got to snap out of this old world thinking, okay? Every country is being manipulated and controlled towards a world war. So that's my take on where immigration stands. So then why was it chosen as the poster cover? Okay, is it coincidence that this march came out just when everyone started talking about their plans to leave social media? Okay, everyone's suddenly been distracted. So just before this protest was announced, everybody started talking about the under 16 social media ban and planning to, transition off that, and everyone's just lost focus. Okay, completely lost focus. Now, these things are planned operations, and I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail. So I don't believe in left or right politics. Now, I try to get that through to my friends, and people then come at me and they go, you must be a lefty wokey or whatever that is, right? And I spent years, okay, well before COVID, looking at the woke culture, the left wing stuff. And I'll give you an example. Black Lives Matter, right? I've really gone at this topic and explained to people how it is an operation, and even here in Australia and worldwide, they're instigating Indigenous people to, I guess, revisit feelings of hate and anger. It's being instigated. Now, like I say, there's always a middle ground. There's always a middle ground. Now, I'm not saying that Indigenous people don't face racism, because people who say that's that extreme, that's not. But they want the indigenous people to go to the extreme on that side. When really, we both, all of us should need to meet in the middle. Black Lives Matter, like I've been like, smashing this topic for years. I had a friend back in Melbourne who was African, and he started talking about Black Lives Matter, and I got on the phone to him. I said, bro, you know, I'm just going to be candid. I'm gonna swear a little bit in this video. I said, dude, you're a fucking idiot if you're buying into this stuff. And I tried to explain to him that it's part of the agenda to try and use identity politics. And this is what they're doing, okay? Identity politics for you to choose one camp and then go out the other camp. And now they're introducing the right-wing stuff. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that as we keep going. And I said to him, I said, bro, you're not facing any systemic racism. Okay? Systemic means it's built into the government policies, it's built into company policies. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there is still racism around, but it's not systemic. Okay? It was maybe years and years ago. And he's like, oh, I said, mate, even like in general, our society, compared to when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, the racism is at a much lower level, And this guy, I can tell you, doesn't read and write well. And this is another example of what I've stood against in the past. And he got himself a job as a paramedic. Okay, now I know that they have special assistance for certain, backgrounded people, and they basically pass them through the courses. Okay, because I know this guy's ability to read and write, it's pretty shit. And now he's out there working as a paramedic, and that also ties in with this whole quota system. This quota system is part of the agenda. It's socialism. Okay, so from my perspective, you should be of merit. You should be of capability, and then you can obtain whatever job that is. And they're doing it not just with race; it's by gender as well. So this is part of socialism, and I've explained this many times. So for people out there that are going to try and point that finger at me, nah, you can't point that finger at me and say, well, you're a Democrat supporter or you're a Albo supporter. No way. Okay. So I'm going to keep moving, guys. The media is a massive part of every agenda, all right, that happens. And when we look at this particular protest, we can see the media is promoting it. Okay? The algorithms of social media, they don't allow things that they don't want out there to get exposure. That's how they use the algorithms. They'll shut it down. But this protest is being is weighted highly in the algorithm. It's getting lots of exposure. We've got premiers coming out and supporting this, and politicians. Come on, guys. You got to start thinking a little bit here. Now, I'm going to keep going, guys. Like, there's a lot of people, and I want to say this respectfully, who haven't really done their education on the New World Order. And there's a lot of speakers out there and people that are really, trying to step up in the public stage here. And it's pretty clear they don't know much about the New World Order, and they need to go and do their education, because that's what's going on here, guys. Excuse me. Otherwise, if you don't do that, excuse me, guys, you are going to get played into assisting the agenda. And that's what we're seeing here, guys, with this protest. Now, I think a good way to look at it is, oh man, this is crazy. See there, the Wi-Fi is getting at me. Who knows? Just kidding. But we've got to let our emotions calm down a bit and start thinking. Okay, so that's why I'm making this video, to try and come at people from a balanced, rational place. So when we talk about race and immigration and all those things, again, we've got to take a balanced view on that, and somewhere there's a middle ground. We've also lost this, I call it, that what we're living in now is the age of ego. So we've lost our natural human behavior to congregate and listen. and let certain people speak and explain things to people. So, like, I've spent 25 years studying the New World Order agenda. There are others out there, and they don't seem to be getting much um, airtime or Facebook time or whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to mention, I mentioned before Max Egan. He's got a lot of knowledge. He seems to have been pushed out of this freedom movement, like myself. In many ways, there's a lot of the people in this movement who just don't want to hear it. They have their own agendas at play. Okay, so our natural human behavior isn't this ego age that we live in. Basically, when we look back at how humans operated, we lived in smaller communities, and within those communities would be some people who had more knowledge, who had more intelligence, more drive, more or bravery, whatever it was, and they ended up being, part of a council, or they were the chiefs, and people actually turned to them with humility and said, "Hey, what's the best thing we should be doing?" And those people guided their communities into safety, into finding food and staying alive and having shelter and being prosperous. That is how our natural human behavior. I'm going to make a whole video on how the New World Order has been successful in taking us away from that. They're effectively using the bi-party system and a few other isms that they brought in. That's for another video. So we've got to go back to that, guys. Now, the other thing I want to point out, okay, we had this ABC report 2 weeks back now. All right, the ABC report was on sovereign citizens. Now, I won't talk too much about the actual report, but I think whoever participated, well, I don't know what the thinking was there. But basically, the report came out, and the summary of it is that sovereign citizens, and they lumped in conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, etc., are more of a danger to this country than we've thought before. Okay, that's the conclusion of that. Whether, of course, it's bullshit, we know that, but that's what they're putting out there, and they have the media at their disposal. Following on from that, we had the shootings in Victoria, where 2 police officers were shot dead and 1 was injured. Now, that was with a bloke named Desi Freeman, and whatever happened to that, we'll never know the real truth, and they will guide whatever narrative they want. But what's already coming out from that is there have been some news articles around that asking for stronger action towards these sovereign citizen groups. Excuse me, guys. I'm going to get this video done tonight. There's been they want stronger action against the sovereign citizen groups. Well, and they want to have law enforcement take more serious action. Okay, so we've got to start thinking. First the report, then the shootings, okay, and now the protests. All lined up perfectly. Okay, all lined up perfectly. Okay. Now, what I want to also address is a bit of propaganda that's out there. Well, I want to talk about, I guess, a bit about my background and what we see as a sudden rise now in nationalism. Okay, now I'm just going to put the fan on. Give me 1 sec, guys. Get a bit stuffy in this room here. So we've seen a rise in this, and what they're trying to do with this is, again, play the identity politics. Now, we've seen a lot of people come up suddenly. Wow. Talking about Adolf Hitler and, blah, 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 right? So the narrative that's being thrown around is that Adolf Hitler was a good guy and that he was fighting the New World Order. Okay, and that stems off a documentary called Europa, The Final Battle. Okay, now, propaganda, you've got to understand that there's 95% truth in any good propaganda documentary or film or whatever it is, and then 5% is added on for whatever agenda they want. I'm going to give you guys some proper proof here. So there's a lot of people shifting towards this camp here. Okay? And the proper proof I'm going to provide here is that Adolf Hitler was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation before. So the Nazi Party was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation before World War II and during World War II. Okay, now really just think about that. Just have a good think about that. Okay, and then I want you guys to start thinking about what happened after World War II. Okay, was the creation of the State of Israel, and was the creation of many organizations such as the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, etc., etc. Okay, so there was a strategic result from World War II. Okay, now the other thing I want people to understand is Hitler, his body was never found. Right now, that's very similar to the world's most wanted terrorist, which was Osama bin Laden. Okay, and I don't know how you guys can digest this, but we had some badass Navy SEALs, and these are some bad boys, and they picked him up, they caught him, and for some reason they decided not to fly him back on a plane, which is odd in itself, and they put his body in a ship instead, and brought him back home. But instead of bringing him back to the United States, on the spot, out of religious respect, apparently, they'll have you believe this, that these badass Navy SEALs, out of religious respect, decided to cremate his body on that ship and throw his ashes overboard into the ocean. Wow. Okay, so most people know Osama was an asset. Okay, and he was retired. He's not dead. Okay, and neither was Hitler. Hitler was retired. He's not dead. Okay, he was an asset. He was retired. A lot of people can look at. There's a lot more evidence around Hitler and his role, and you've got to go back to World War One and look at what happened there. World War One was also part of this New World Order agenda, and I'm going to make a whole video series explaining what really went on in World War One and what went on in World War Two. Okay, now I also want to get into my background a little bit as somebody who's half German, and I very much, I love my culture and my heritage on both sides. So I do a lot of reading, and I've studied a lot about like what's happened in Germany and ancient history to modern history. During my search for knowledge in these areas, I have uncovered certain things about World War II, about the Holocaust. Okay, and I can tell you definitely, I've seen solid evidence that the Holocaust didn't quite happen the way they've told us. I'm not going to say too much more about it, but what I will say is I've seen a census that has the population numbers of Jews that lived inside Germany and Europe at that time. Okay, and it's a much exaggerated number that they tell us now. I've also seen a documentary about a guy named Dr. Leichter, I think his name was, Mr. Leichter. He wasn't a doctor, but he was in charge of designing and manufacturing all of the death machines for people that were on death row. Okay, so lethal injection, electric chair, that kind of thing. So he was an expert in death machines. He got invited to Germany to participate in investigating the Holocaust buildings that were used in the Holocaust, and he declined. He said no thanks. Some German guys contacted him. He said no thanks. You guys are a bunch of racist Nazis. And this went on for a few years until he finally thought, all right, that's it. I'm going to go over there and shut these guys up. So he goes over, and what he finds instead, okay, this is interesting. Now, this is what he says. This is from his reports. His reports are that these buildings could never have been used as gas chambers because they didn't have the physical capacity, the physical capability is the words I think he used. And then he also found there were no traces of any gas, and he did forensic tests and things like that. Now, this guy came back to the United States, and basically all his contracts were taken off him. He was smashed. His life was ruined, and he received death threats and so on. And they changed the laws around discussing the Holocaust after that. And I believe he also was put in prison for some time. Okay, so I understand all of these things, but okay, you've got to understand that these New World Order people, they don't see race and religion like we do because we've fallen into the trap. They did kill a lot of Jews. Okay, there is no doubt about it during World War II. And they did that so they could establish the state of Israel. Okay, and right now, what's going on in Israel is what is most people have can't understand what's really going on there. The goal of what's going on in Israel, and I'm going to explain this in another video. The real goal is they want the Arab states to attack Israel. Okay, and they're going to put their Jewish people again to death. Okay, this is what the goal is, the New World Order goal, and I will explain that in more detail in another video. Okay, now the people in the New World Order, they started Zionism. There was a fellow named, well, name's not coming to me right now, but he worked together with one of the Rothschilds, and they created the ideology of Zionism, but they are not actually real Jewish people. They have the Eastern Europeans, I think they're Khazarian, and they converted to Judaism and they created Zionism. It's all just a tool for them. They couldn't care less about any person, any people at all. Okay, and so this is where I say you got to take that balance view. And you know, I have friends who are Jewish, I have friends who are Muslim who are fighting against this New World Order stuff and fighting against what this government's doing in this country here. So I don't take up any of those stances at all. And you really you've got to see things clearly, or you're going to fall into the trap, and you're going to help their agenda by fighting each other. And on that indigenous issues I mentioned before, you know, again, there's always a balanced middle ground. So when people say to me, oh, they're indigenous, this, that, and the other, yeah, okay, they are trying to instigate that from the indigenous people. Okay, but let's be real about it. The indigenous people have faced racism, okay, and they have faced forced labor. And I mean, that's a nice way of putting it, forced labor. I mean, they have faced slavery. They were shackled and brought to farms and made to work for nothing and just fed. Okay, that's called slavery. So we've got to be real, guys. We've got to be balanced and you know, have that objective point of view, because you can't reach a middle ground without that. So to deny that to people, and the racism does still continue. And you know, when you go online and you just go to certain YouTube videos, you'll see words being thrown around about indigenous people. So it is still continuing. Is it systematic? No. Are they using the indigenous issues as part of the rollout of the Great Reset? 100%. They're taking indigenous leaders that have sold out and getting them to do their bidding. Okay, and I won't. That's a whole detailed video that I need to put together on that. Now, is there reverse racism? Of course there is. So my message is to both sides. You know, it's not to just the white side or the European side. I've seen indigenous people who are holding racist views and are flat out racist. I've seen black people who are fully racist as well. So none of this stuff helps. None of it helps. But on that note, you know, I think, again, when we look at these protests, these pro-Palestinian protests, you know, I recall when there was a terrorist attack in Paris, I believe, or somewhere in France. And this was in, I think, the mid-2000s, or perhaps the teens, the 20 teens. And I think it was around 16 or so people died. It wasn't a huge amount of people. Now, I'm not taking away from the value of those people's lives, but it wasn't a huge amount of people. And in Australia, people started posting on their Facebook profile pictures the French flag across their profile picture. Okay, and nobody batted an eyelid and said, this is un-Australian to show another country's flag. Okay, why? Why did nobody have a problem with it then? Okay, this was widespread. Okay, and I also recall during the war in Iraq that Now, the war in Iraq, I'll quickly just do a quick explanation. I know the video is getting long, but I'm just going to tell you guys this. All right, now, firstly, as a disclaimer, I do not take away anything from the people that served in our Australian Defence Force in any of the wars, because I hold a lot of respect and honour for those people. They were serving our country and they were serving their people. This is absolutely horrible, but hopefully you guys can bear with me. Um, and I respect those people a lot, and I believe they were coming from a good place, and they thought they were doing the best thing for their country, for their people. Okay, they were tricked and duped, and they didn't understand what's really going on. Now, since the war in Iraq, the evidence has come out. The whole thing was fabricated, the WMDs, that's a fact, 100% fact. There is a video that Colin Powell, who's now passed away, as a piece of shit. He's a piece of shit. And I'll tell you why he's a piece of shit. So Colin Powell knew what he was doing. He presented a video to the United Nations. This is what triggered the invasion. He presented a video to the United Nations of a truck driving into a factory lot and going into a particular building. What he presented was, he said, this truck is carrying uranium, and this is driving into the uranium processing or enrichment facility. And he knew at the time that that truck was actually carrying cotton, and they were driving into a clothing manufacturing facility. He knew it. Okay, it's come out. It was on an SBS documentary following that war. So the whole thing was a scam. And anybody who's been into this truther movement should know that the 9/11, we know what really happened there. Okay, there's just so much evidence around what really went down in 9/11, and then it makes me really kind of chuckle when I see people who know that, and then suddenly they're jumping on this anti-Islam thing. All right, now I'm not a Muslim myself, and then people are going to come and go, oh, but you're a Muslim lover. No, I love all people. Okay, I love all people until they actually do something. Then I still don't hold the whole race or the whole thing behind them because of a handful of people. So it really makes me chuckle when I see that. Okay, the whole thing was created to get rid of the last countries that didn't have central banks and to make a few more strategic moves before they could do what they're doing today. Okay, and I'll make a whole video outlining that. That's what happened from 9/11 to the invasion of Iraq. But my main point is, during Iraq, we had 1 million civilians die. Okay, in the first year of that invasion, 1 million. I just want you guys to think about that number. Okay, now I remember talking about that with people here in Australia, and most people just couldn't care less. And I thought to myself, and I said it to someone, I said, if they were white people, if they were Australian, if they were from a Western country, would you care? Yes. Okay. We had 16 people die in France, and people were putting flags up. So where I'm going with this is, when we look at what the protesters are doing, the pro-Palestinian protesters, it's nothing to do with being un-Australian. And people are falling into this trap where they say, you're in this camp or you're in this camp. Okay, and people are falling into that because, again, I'm going to say they haven't educated themselves on the New World Order strategies and operations. Okay, for what's going on in Gaza, 60,000 people have died to date, women and children included, and they're starving. Okay, and so when Australian people take to the streets and they want to see that stop, that's nothing to do with being un-Australian. Okay, nobody batted an eyelid when people across this country put the French flag up because 16 people died. Think about that. So is race a factor there? I think 100% it is a factor. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly go over that. And there's a lot of stuff, like we see people popping up that just have no clue, and they've got to go do their research on what's really going on. All right, now I'm going to keep moving, guys. We've got this issues that I talked about with Hitler and with that propaganda movie, Europa, the final battle. Okay, it's pure propaganda. Okay, and they've managed to hoodwink people with 95% truth. Okay, the New World Order main tool is hate. Okay, I want people to think about what happened in World War II. Okay, how many people died? And I had looked at the stats recently. It is massive. It's in the millions of people died during World War II. We're not just talking about the deaths. We're talking about the poverty that came from it. We're talking about the hate. We're talking about people were being tortured, mutilated, starving, raped. It was horrific. Horror was on earth. Okay, how did they manage to get that happening? Through fear and hate. And I'm making a video around this. I was hoping to get it released before the protest, but I will have to get to it afterwards, unfortunately. Okay, and we're falling into the same trick. It's insane that we're allowing this, particularly the so-called awake people are falling into the same trick. It's really sad. It's very sad. And it's very sad to see that when we had the original protests, that you had people standing shoulder to shoulder of different faiths, of different backgrounds, working together, and now suddenly people are turning against them, telling them that this is not their country. That's pretty fucking sad. I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's fucking sad. So I'm going to quickly talk about, why is there a sudden rise in the National Socialist Network? And let's be clear about what the National Socialist Network is. It's neo-Nazis. Okay? It's a racist network. It's not people who have the best interests of this country at their heart. There are other people out there who do, and it's not them. Okay? They are a racist organization. There's no way you can look at it. Now, don't get me wrong, these guys have been around operating for a while, but why are they suddenly getting this prop up? And where's the funding coming from for these guys to do all the court cases they're doing? All right. These organizations get approached when they need to, and they get propped up, okay, when they need to, and they need them now to create the social division, which is what everything's about right now. So most of you guys know, it's just like Black Lives Matter. Okay, so Black Lives Matter, people look at that and go, as we all know, it was created by Soros, wasn't it? Who created Black Lives Matter? One of those scumbag billionaires who works with the Great Reset, New World Order. They funded Black Lives Matter, okay? And it's the same thing on the other side. Okay, we can't be so foolish to fall in these traps, or we're done. I'm telling you. And I already know that we may get there, and so I don't mind. But I'm going to say my piece, and then I'm out. I'll be pulling away from everything when we get to that point, which we're not far away from if you continue helping the agenda unknowingly. So you guys know me, if you've been following me, I don't believe in protests anymore. Okay, and that's since 2020 I've been talking about this. Now before 2020, I've always felt, hey, protests have their way of dealing with issues, and so do petitions and politics. Okay, but because of my previous understanding of the New World Order, as soon as 2020 came, I'm like, guys, forget about it. It is not going to do a thing. Okay, so I'm not a believer in protest at all for dealing with the New World Order. I've put forward other solutions. People are stuck in their prisons, unfortunately, so we haven't had the opportunity to do that. And in my opinion, that door's closed, the window's closed. But when people say to me, "Oh, you're bagging protests and petitions," yeah, I did, and I did present another option. Unfortunately, we were stuck in that prison. So, but I can't believe I'm actually going to say this. If you do want to go to a protest, I believe there's another one being organised in September. Might be worth looking at that. I believe there's going to be issues with that one as well, because the red flag, and I'm going to talk about that red flag thing. Okay, and this is not against people, my friends included, who are in that movement, but you've got to move with the environment, and you've got to recognise what's going on right now. We had ABC report, we had the shootings, now we've got the protests. By the end of this month, I believe the whole movement will be labelled domestic terrorism, and they use certain logos and things that they will designate as representing domestic terrorism. So just be aware that I'm saying it now. But if you must go to that one. Okay, I think it's being organised here by Tricky, and again, most people are going to be surprised if I say go to that one. I don't believe in any of them. Okay, but if you must go to that one. So my thoughts on some of the people involved in this particular protest, and that's another issue, was that nobody wanted to take ownership of it. Now suddenly we've got all these different groups taking ownership. So the first person I'm going to talk about is Beck Freedom. Okay, now Beck Freedom, in my personal experience and dealings with her, which have been mostly online and through Facebook comments and discussion and things like that, she's actually supported what we do with Guardians of Freedom. She has put some positive comments and also shared our events and our activities, including the men's group, Band of Brothers. She's shared that around, and she's assisted us in growing in that way. So I don't believe that she is an outright racist, because obviously I'm brown and she's assisted us. Um, I believe with her, she's succumbed, I guess, to the propaganda stuff that's getting around, that the white race is under attack, and we've got to maintain the white race, and she's probably looking for strength, and so she's fallen in with these type of National Socialist Network people. And honestly, I say to these guys, the young guys going into this National Socialist Network, if you want to find real strength, come to Band of Brothers. Okay, that's what we're building, a brotherhood there, but a brotherhood of good heart, not a brotherhood that is actually assisting the New World Order agenda by participating in the chaos of getting people to attack each other. Okay, and like I said, do not mistake kindness for weakness. Okay, because I will do what needs to get done when it needs to get done. Okay, but that's my thoughts on her. I felt she's a good person, and I felt that she's been sucked into this stuff. And I also feel that personal attacks never help. And I also feel that when we speak to each other with respect, we may be able to build bridges and communicate with people. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that. And the next person is National Socialist Network, Thomas Sewell. Okay, now this guy and the rest of the organization are claiming the protest as well. So bottom line is, if you want to be part of that, that's what you're going to be part of. It's a neo-Nazi group. There's no other way around it. It's a racist group. Okay, I don't know the guy personally, and he may have his own righteous agenda, but some of the things that they talk about is just pure racism. Okay, Cherie Amour, right? She's a person that's very vocal on this protest and everything else she posts. So I'm going to try not to personalize my feedback or my comments here. Her views are outright racist. Okay, her behavior, her comments are outright racist, and they are full of hate. Okay, now I've been like really thinking, why is she behaving like this? And one of the things I think that's happening, people are frustrated, people are angry, and people are looking for a target to lash out their anger at, and they've been given one. It's the Muslims and the Jews, so go for it. Okay, and that is given by the New World Order. Okay, and we're falling for it now. There's other issues going on with her. Okay, but this is the kind of people that you'll be walking with, and you go to her page and have a read through. She proudly says, "I am a racist." She hates Indians, she hates Chinese, she hates everyone. She hates the Muslims, she hates the Jews, she hates everyone except white people, right? So that's that. Now the last one is some guy that's popped up out of nowhere, all right? I'm not going to mention the name of this guy even right now. I'm going to make a whole video on this. And the group that he's formed, okay, you guys will work this out hopefully. Okay, this guy's an ex-military guy, and he's formed a certain group. Now, the name of this group, the connotations would easily land under militia, forming a militia, which is a crime in Australia under the domestic terrorism and treason legislation. Okay, the logo of this group that this guy's formed is a sniper, okay, which again would very easily help the group to fall under the domestic terrorism legislation, forming a militia. The group itself has decided to give out berets, okay, which again would tick the box of domestic terrorism militia. The group is also providing people with a little booklet that has ranks, okay, that would also easily be proven in court to be forming a militia. Now, I don't know if this guy is maybe his emotions are getting the better of him, and that's not that's switched off, and his emotions have taken over, and he's charge ahead, da 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 da. Possible. I doubt it, because I think you'd have to be. I don't think anyone can be that silly to miss all those things. It's almost as though you're ticking all the boxes required for a successful prosecution. Okay, now in my opinion, it's an operation, and when people hear that, they might go, oh, look, I'm just saying this to try and help you guys out there. Okay, there was actually a sting operation done in 2022. There was a group running around calling themselves a real AFP, and it turned out to be a sting operation. Okay, and in Australia, it is not illegal for police to use entrapment. Okay, and entrapment means they'll set up things like this, and you'll get in it. It is also in Australia, not up to, well, basically you cannot plead ignorance, okay, to the law. So I'm going to make a whole nother video on that. Now, the last video I watched of this guy, he was calling for the military to be used to search and apprehend anybody like Desi Freeman. Okay, that if that precedent gets set, and I believe that's where it's going to go anyway, but he's calling for that, and so it really tells me that this dude has no fucking clue about the New World Order, or he's an operative. It's one or the other. Okay, that's basically it, guys. Long bloody video, lots of information. I hope it helps. And look, essentially my conclusion is this: you know, people always say, "Don't tell me what to do. Nobody tells me what to do." Blah blah blah. Well, here's what I'm going to say: if you go to this protest, in my opinion, you are assisting the New World Order agenda. Okay, you are assisting that. Okay, there are much better ways to do things. Okay, and this is not it. The writing's on the wall, all the markings are there. Make your own mind up. But you know what? I will definitely start holding people accountable going forward. As in, hey mate, you've assisted this. Okay, people need to be held accountable, because we can't go from mistake to mistake. And this, where we're at now, if we keep going from mistake to mistake, we're in big fucking trouble. Okay, and we're almost at the end of our capabilities to do anything. Once the movement gets labelled as domestic terrorist movement, that's it. You can't organise get-togethers. You can't do anything. Okay, so start thinking. Switch off the emotions. Calm them down a bit. Start thinking a bit, guys. I'm out of here, guys. Long video. All right. Let me know your thoughts. Take care out there.